It's good to be here today. It's good to be here on a day that we commemorate that's on sort of the church calendar. Here we are on Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry. And there's a lot that we're going to be able to get into today pertaining to that, and I'm excited to do that because it fits hand in glove with this sermon series that we're in right now called God's Story BC. So it's important, though, that as we get into this, that we prepare our hearts because there's a little bit of a tension that exists in Palm Sunday. There's a tension that exists in Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And if you're not familiar with that story, we're going to get into it in just a minute. But let me just set the stage for you. This was a situation as Jesus is about to ride into Jerusalem. He's been ministering for 3 years. And he is dealing with a group of people who haven't necessarily read the terms and conditions on what he's all about. How many people in here, whenever you go to a website, when you sign up for something, you set up an account, you have to click, yes, I've read the terms and conditions. You read every word. You analyze it, you send it to your lawyer, you send it to your attorney, you double check just to make sure before I sign up for this. I don't know, it could even just be something as simple as like a fantasy football league. You got to read the terms and services. And the funny thing is our daughter, if you know our oldest daughter, I want to pick on her a little bit. She is a very responsible child. She's 16 going on 39. And she gets mad at us when we tell her to take a break from homework. She's that type of girl. And the other day we were talking about something and she was like, Dad, I was reading the terms and conditions on this thing. And I'm like, time out. What? You're the first person in the history of the world that's proving a point by saying, well, I was reading the terms and conditions. She probably needs to be an attorney. But terms and conditions are important because it's contractual, I can say that. It's tied to the agreement that's taking place between two parties. And if there's a lack of clarity there, you know, aside from our silly fantasy football leagues, but in other areas, it can be important. The terms and conditions. Otherwise, if we don't read them, if we don't line them out, we will have unspoken terms and conditions. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before. Like I did one time. It was probably about 1980. Well, let's see, I wasn't alive in the 80s, so I probably shouldn't say that. I'm kidding, I was. I'm old, okay? It was in the 1980s. Probably, I'm going to say 85. And my mom and dad said, hey, the Easter Bunny is coming over. And I'm like, whoa. How? Like, this is amazing. The Easter Bunny is coming over. And here I am building my expectations on, okay, like some people have Santa Claus come over. We're having the Easter Bunny come over. It's going to be crazy. Like, it's going to be maybe a little scary. It's weird, like a giant bunny. Like, how big is it? Is he going to talk? Is it going to be like Alice in Wonderland? Like, this is weird. And I'm like excited. And then this person shows up and it's almost like a singing telegram. And it's a woman with bunny ears on and a painted face. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, whose idea was this? Is not the Easter Bunny. Mom, I'm pretty sure this is like the secretary at the place where you work. It's kind of lame. So there was an unspoken expectation I had in there, and my parents were providing a service, and it didn't match my expectations, and I wasn't very happy about that. And that'll happen sometimes. When we don't have spoken expectations about something, we will assume them. And I'm going to tell you something right now. The moment you assume expectations, you're in trouble. I'm in trouble. You ever done that before? You ever assumed expectations in, I don't know, your marriage? Like, that is ground zero for this. Have you ever assumed expectations, even with something light, like all Easter bunnies aside? Like my wife has done this thing, which is really funny, where she orders something on Instacart, and you know we need like, I don't know, a balloon. I think this happened to one of her friends. It's like her daughter was turning like 13, so they ordered this on Instacart, and she got the 1 balloon and the 3 balloon. She didn't check the sizes, so she got a 1 that was this big and a 3 that was like that big, which is hilarious. But when expectations aren't met, it can cause issues. It can cause complications. You know, you go to that Airbnb, and it's not really the expectations you had in mind. It can kind of ruin the whole trip. But then when you get into more relational spaces, whenever you get into more life expectation, honestly, that is where a lot of difficulty and pain can exist. When we're not paying attention, when we're not communicating what's really going on here, not something as rigid as terms and services, but something along those lines, when we're not really communicating what is going to be provided, what I'm looking for, things get out of whack. This is essentially what's taking place on Palm Sunday. And this is something that Jesus was acutely aware of. He is riding into town on Palm Sunday. And he knows that he knows in the deepest part of who he is, they don't understand what's going on here. They have unspoken expectations that they're imposing on what's really taking place here, and it's about to cause a lot of problems. Which is why whenever we talk about Palm Sunday, we talk about the palm branches, we talk about celebrating, we talk about Hosanna. Actually, this is a really tragic scene. Which is why, as Jesus is riding in to Jerusalem, a much overlooked passage in the book of Luke, chapter 19, when Jesus is riding on the colt into Jerusalem for the last time, and everybody is praising him. It is ticker tape, and people are saying Hosanna. The paparazzi flashes are going off. If you could slow that down and block out all of that noise in slow motion, you see the Savior sitting on the colt, weeping. He's weeping. You can see this in verse 41 of chapter 19. It says, as he came closer to Jerusalem, he saw the city ahead and he began to weep. How I wish today that you, all people, would understand the way to peace. But now it's too late, and peace is hidden from your eyes. Before long, your enemies will build ramparts against you, your walls, and encircle you and close in on you from every side. They will crush you into the ground, and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place because you did not recognize it when God visited you. What's taking place here? Jesus was a very specific kind of king. Yes, he is the king. In fact, he is the King of kings and he is the Lord of lords. Cosmically. And he's riding into town in the midst of his chosen people. And there's a reason why he's riding on a colt, on a donkey. He's not riding on a horse. See, in ancient times, you ride into town on a horse, it's wartime. But when you ride in on a donkey, it's peacetime, which is why he's saying, you don't understand the way to peace. I came to bring peace. They are gearing up for war. See, the problem with the people that were saying Hosanna, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, is their mismatched expectations of the type of king that he is and the timing of when he was going to do his thing. Because the word Hosanna that they were shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna, do you know what that means? That means save us now. Save us now. They thought that Jesus was riding into town and it was about to go down. He was going to march into the center of the city and he was going to take down the Roman authority. He was going to take down Herod and he was going to establish the eternal Davidic reign of God on earth. And they were saying Hosanna because they believed that was about to happen. And he's saying, you don't get it. You don't get the bigger picture here. You're imposing your expectations. You're conflating your expectations on what's really taking place here. And it's going to cause a lot of problems. This is something that we can do quite frequently, and we're going to talk about this in just a little bit. But when we start to conflate our expectations with what God is really up to, it can cause a lot of problems, a lot of disorientation. So what I want to do this morning as we talk about Palm Sunday, as we do a flashback into God's story BC, I want you to find your place, the very common place that all of us can find ourselves in when God is up to something magnificent. But we are settling for imposing our expectations on how it should look. It's a helpful reminder. It's a necessary reminder because this is how we're wired. See, one of the reasons why I believe Jesus was crying and he was weeping, this is deja vu. It was happening again. I wonder if when Jesus is riding on this donkey, he's sitting there thinking it's happening again. These people, the Jews, they have done this time and time again. Humanity has done this time and time again, where they fail to recognize God's true lordship and what his terms and conditions are on this creation. And by not recognizing it, it's going to cause problems. This is what Adam and Eve did. There was a clear term and condition in that garden. You can do anything you want in this garden. You can cultivate it. You can name the animals. You can eat of anything. One term and condition: you're not to eat of that tree. And then when Satan slithered in, this agent of chaos, and he confused and mixed and distracted them from what God had said to them, they began to lose their concept of God's lordship in that setting, because you can be a God as he is. And this caused a deep disorientation that led to a fracture and disobedience and the very sin that has led mankind into this place of needing a Savior. And they were acting out of a mismatched expectation of their role in the garden. It starts with Adam and Eve, and it continues from that point on. When mankind is so wicked, as we talked about a few weeks ago, and they're doing everything they want in their own eyes in the time of Noah, and a flood had to come, and God's judgment reigned. With Abraham, we see this. When God gave very clear terms and conditions, he said, I'm going to give you a land, and I'm going to give you a people. And he laughs, as Pastor Bud talked about a few weeks ago. They laughed. Sarah laughed. What are you talking about? Yeah, I'm too old. I can't have kids. So what did they do? They took matters into their own hands because they started to doubt God's terms and conditions. They didn't think that that God could live up to their expectations of how this needed to happen. You can't do this, God. We got this. We got this. Enter Hagar and Ishmael. Israel did this whenever God promised them a land. He did these plagues in Egypt, and he takes them through the Red Sea. He takes them to Mount Sinai. There's this magnificent just spectacle of God's greatness on Mount Sinai. And they get the law, and they get clarity on how they can bring God's presence into the midst of the people. And he does miracle after miracle, and then he leads them to the land that he has promised them. And they're like, nope. And for this reason, we're out. And they back away, because it was too far beyond what they believed God could accomplish within their understanding of expectations. Jesus, I'm wondering if in this moment as he's riding into town, he's saying, they're doing it again. This morning we're going to pick up where we left off last week when Pastor Nate was walking us through the Judges. And we have already, as we've talked about, gone through Adam and Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Joshua and the Promised Land. 300 years then, there was these individuals that sort of oversaw the different tribes in Israel. They were called the Judges. And it reached a point after you've had a few good judges like Deborah and Gideon and Samson, there's a final judge. His name is Samuel. He's the last judge. It's a very unique political environment where they don't have the same monarchical structure that all the other nations have. And it actually wasn't even totally working for them. And a lot of it just came down because of their own hearts that continued to stray from God. And this is the very last verse in the book of Judges. After you have Moses and then this 200 to 300 years of judges reigning, the very last verse in the book of Judges says this: in those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. And scene. Yikes. That doesn't sound good. And you know what? It wasn't. It wasn't good. Israel began to morally just kind of scatter into these places where they weren't trusting God. They weren't looking to God. And you have this last judge. His name is Samuel. And he does what he can to focus Israel. They go to war with the Philistines, and he's relatively successful. There's a tug of war over the Ark of the Covenant. And finally, it's getting to a point where Samuel is getting old, but his sons are wicked. And Israel is saying, you know what? We're done with this judges thing. It's not working. Samuel, you might be good, but your sons are wicked. We don't want them to rule over us anyway. Just give us a king. And Samuel's like, that's not a good idea. They're like, no, we want a king. All the other nations have a king. We want a king. They literally said that. They're like children. All my other friends have the PS5. I want one. I'm not speaking from experience. It's the same thing. All the other nations have a king. And Samuel's like, guys, you don't know what you're asking for. So Samuel In 1 Samuel 8, 6 through 10, you can see this unfold when they say, give us a king to lead us. This displeased Samuel. And so he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. This is what God's saying. As they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. So listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. This is the terms and conditions were starting to fall apart. God's terms and conditions, similar to the garden, are this. I will be your God, and you will be my people. I will be your king, and I will reign over you. And I will use proxy priests and prophets to rule over you and the judges. And that's how this is going to work. And they're saying, no, we want a king. He's like, okay, well, the rights that I'm claiming over you as your king, your human king is going to also claim rights over you. They're going to tax you. They're going to take your land. They're going to take you into war. They're going to do all kinds of things that this nation might not be up for, and it's going to impact you. But if that's what you want, I'll give it to you. And so that's what they get. They get a king. Samuel, after warning the people, goes on a search. And in the tribe of Benjamin, they run across this tall, dashing, handsome, charismatic guy named Saul. I'm not very good at being dashing. That didn't really land. They thought this guy was going to be the king. This is the dude. He's strong. He's a warrior. He's from the right tribe. We want this guy. This is the king that they thought they were expecting. Yeah, let's go with Saul. And God is saying, yeah, this will be the guy. We're going to anoint him. He's been successful in battles, and he's willing to do it. Saul is the king. And within 3 chapters, Saul, his pride, his ego, disqualify him completely due to his disobedience. And he starts to color outside the lines because his ego and his pride is so big. He moves outside of the clear instructions, the terms and conditions that God has set for how the king is going to set up. He starts to act more like a priest. He starts to act more like someone from the tribe of Levi. He starts making sacrifices at points when he's not supposed to be doing it. And God's saying, yeah, you done colored outside of the lines. You're done. And in chapter 15, Saul is rejected. And in the middle of all this, the consternation of this egotistical maniac, which is literally what he was, there's this little boy who's off. He's not even the oldest son of a man named Jesse. His name's David. And God is telling Samuel, this is going to be the next guy. And he starts to interact with Saul in certain ways. In fact, David is a musician. He's a shepherd and he's a musician, and he's brought in to actually serenade Saul because he had an evil spirit. And he would get a little sometimes. So they'd bring David in, and David would play a harp and calm him down until Saul would get really weirded out and freaked out, and he'd throw a spear at him. Strange stuff happened. But now you get this weird tension that's now taking place between Saul and David. Saul, the king, who's failed, who's basically been disinaugurated. He's still the king, but God's like, well, you're going to be out in a second. David is next. And then David just starts showing up. Bro goes into the battle with the Philistines without any armor and takes out Goliath. Then he starts to gain popularity. Then people start singing songs about him because he's becoming this great warrior. Saul becomes jealous. He starts to hunt him down, and for years, David is on the run because Saul is trying to stop a train that won't be stopped. He sees that David is the anointed one, but he can't handle it, so he's chasing David down. And David is living in fear. He's running. But the one thing that David refuses to do is he refuses to kill Saul. He had multiple opportunities to kill Saul. Like, I'm the anointed one now. You're the failed king. I could take you out. There's one time where Saul is right next to him, using the restroom, and David's right there. He's in a very vulnerable spot, and David's like, I could do it. And he doesn't. And he proves to Saul time and time again, I could take you out, man, but I'm not going to because you are God's anointed one. And the more that sinks in with Saul, the more he is deflated, the more he realizes that God's favor is upon him. And eventually Saul is humiliated in battle. And he can't take it anymore. He takes his own life. He falls on his own sword. And now we have the true anointed king of Israel inaugurated. David becomes the king. And God makes a promise to David. I want you to hear this. God makes a promise to David. Samuel the prophet has now passed away. There's a new prophet now. His name is Nathan. And the way things are going to work now in this kingdom is you have a king and he's got a prophet. And this prophet is always acting as this intermediary between God and the king. And now Nathan says this, and this is super important in 2 Samuel 7:13-17. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the son of men, but my steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. And in accordance with all these words and in accordance with all this vision, Nathan spoke to David. So this is something significant. God is saying, yes, Saul was the first king. You guys wanted a king. I gave you a king. I anointed him. He was disobedient, so I removed him. This isn't going to happen with David. As a matter of fact, my eternal forever reign will rest upon David. This is the king that they were expecting when they asked for one. This is the king. And David's reign, let's be honest, was fraught with conspiracy and threat. It wasn't too long until his sons were trying to take him out. Super dysfunctional. The sons threatened to take the kingdom from him. He's on the run. But he's also very successful. He's successful in battle. He's the one that kind of brought the capital of Israel into Jerusalem. He brings the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. He gets the vision for the temple. And God says, yes, this is something I want to build the temple, but it's not going to happen through you. It's going to happen through your son Solomon. But he is embattled and he's embroiled in controversy. He does sin. He's imperfect. He sins with Bathsheba. And even though he was morally errant, he was still a man who was faithful to God, who was used by God. He was a successful king. And as David passes away, it gets a little confusing here because we thought this was going to be the forever kingdom, right? Through David. But he has to turn the kingdom over to Solomon. And this, honestly, though, is the beginning of Israel's golden age. There's a stability that Solomon brings to the kingdom of Israel. It's larger than it's ever been. It's occupying more land mass than Israel has ever owned. There's peace, there's wealth, there's stability, there's religious ascent, there's the building of the temple. Solomon's temple is built. And all of the ordinances and the sacrifices and the rituals that make Israel who they are, that give them their identity and their culture and their communion with God, with the Ark of the Covenant in the inner sanctum and God's presence residing and the priestly roles and activity. It is the heyday of Israel's identity. And they're like, this is what we're talking about. This is the king that we were expecting. This is the king that we want. And as wise as Solomon was, in his fallen brokenness, he could not escape the spiritual decay that diseased his soul. And he was in a constant state of spiritual decay. And as a result of that, though he was successful, the kingdom started to lose its health after a while. And he had two sons that were awful, Jeroboam and Rehoboam. And they, before he dies, begin to maneuver, how are we going to take this kingdom and make it ours? And what happens is ripped apart. Israel is quite literally ripped apart. And this is where you get in Israel the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. We'll put up a map here to show you what we're talking about here. The northern kingdom is the kingdom of Israel. This is most of the tribes of Israel are up in the northern kingdom, and they're led by Jeroboam. And in the southern kingdom, you have Judah. There's only a couple tribes down here in Judah, and that's led by Rehoboam. And this right here is after 3 kings. You have the judges, Saul, David, Solomon. From this point on, the kingdom is split in half. And every king that comes after this is actually either from the northern or the southern kingdom. So when you're reading 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, all of these books in the Old Testament, we're actually talking about different kings in these two technically different kingdoms. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. Because in this, there was one wicked king after another. And it was a total chaotic mess. And the people of Israel were constantly looking for the right kind of king. And they could never find it. Because there was idol worship. They were unfaithful to the law. They would do debaucherous things in the house of the Lord. They would make covenants with pagan nations, and they would begin to syncretize their worship with awful pagan worship. Let's just give a little history lesson here. Go ahead and put that map back up here real quick. In this northern kingdom here, everything that's taking place up in Israel, they were more willing to mix with other nations. Most of the people, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second because of an exile, most of the people in that kingdom of Israel mixed with so many other nations. After the exiles, when they came back together, those are the people that were called the Samaritans. Why were they dogs? Why were they filthy? Why were they dirty, according to the Jews? Because in that northern kingdom, they mixed themselves with all the different pagan nations, and they lost touch with what God really wanted out of his covenant people. But both kingdoms were corrupt. God sent prophet after prophet after prophet into the midst to say, guys, knock this off. You're worshiping false gods. You have strayed from the covenants of God. He sends Elijah. He sends Isaiah. He sends Jeremiah. Then exile comes. The Assyrians come in and they take the northern kingdom exile. They essentially, they just destroy the northern kingdom. So everybody in Israel is taken into exile into Assyria. Everybody in the southern kingdom eventually, just a few hundred years later, is taken into exile in Babylon. And then as Israel is laying in ruins, eventually God stays true to his promises and he brings them back. Nehemiah comes back to Jerusalem and rebuilds the walls with Zerubbabel. The Jews return to Judah and they're finally back in the land. And then something really interesting happens as God has made good on bringing his people back into the land after this wreck of a mess of chaotic monarchy and kings misbehaving and idol worship, as he brings them back into the land after 70 years of exile in Babylon. He sends a few prophets in to give them some correction and some teaching, and then God goes silent. And for 400 years, they're not hearing from God. Where did he go? After 400 years, as they continue to sort of reestablish the proper way that they should operate in community and in worship and in covenant, and you have all these different sects sort of pop up. You've got the Zealots, and you've got the Pharisees, and you've got the Sadducees, and you have all these groups who are establishing their role as like, this is how we're supposed to be as a community. And after 400 years, you've got all these different groups, and that's when all of a sudden, this rumor begins to swirl. This rumor begins to swirl because as the people who were in exile 400 years earlier were often to the east, they would share with them the promises of their God. They would share with them their scriptures and the prophecies of old. And suddenly in Jerusalem, there's this guy named Herod, and these individuals show up. They're called kingmakers. We know them as the Magi or as the wise men. And they say, we've heard rumors going back centuries that there is a king to be born here in this land, and it will have a cosmic impact. And Herod's like, really? Cool. So he gets all of his scribes. He's like, what are they talking about? And they look at the scriptures. Oh, Micah. Yeah, the king, the true king of Israel, the messianic king. He's going to be born in a place called Bethlehem. Herod goes to him and says, we figured out he's going to be in Bethlehem. He's going to be born. If you're seeing all these astrological signs tied to these prophecies that this king is going to be born, go and find him. Bring him to me so that I can worship him. And they're like, okay. So they go, and they go to Bethlehem. And they find the child, the king. There he is, the true king. They find this baby. And they worship him, and they give him gifts, and they adore him. And then they're given a vision that says, don't go back to Herod. And they're like, yeah, good idea. They go home. And when Herod finds out, he loses his mind. He kills all the children 2 and under in Bethlehem. And then for 30 years, it goes quiet again until there's this really strange, weird dude with long hair who doesn't bathe and eats locusts for breakfast. His name's John. He comes out of the wilderness and he starts to scream into the crowds, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he who was spoken of by the prophet Israel when he said, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. And John the Baptist sets the scene, sets the stage. Repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And he steps aside, and who enters in? But this boy who is now a man. He is a teacher. He is a healer. He is a miracle maker. He confronts the religious establishment. He is unfazed by people's expectations. And he is here to do the will of the Father. And he is unwavering, and he is focused, and he knows that his mission is to carry this through to completion, to a place where he can say, this is finished. After generations of humankind misunderstanding God's true lordship and true kingship and how he's to operate, he knows that he is the one that is going to make things correct and make it right. And he rocks the world for 3 years. And it culminates in this really fascinating moment when 2 of his friends, their brother dies. And they'd been asking Jesus to come and heal him because he had been sick for a while. But Jesus never showed up. And then he's dead and he's in the tomb for a couple days. And then Jesus shows up and these 2 women, Mary and Martha, are like, where have you been? Like, what? You could have healed him. And he weeps with them. Why? Because he knows something they don't know. The terms and conditions of what they'd placed on him. When we call you, come and you heal. Do you understand? He says, no, it's not how this works. I don't just want to scratch your itches. I don't just want to heal your sickness. I want to enter into your grief, your darkness. I want to enter into your fears. I want to enter into the lowest, darkest points of your experiences. And I want to be present, Emmanuel, God, with you in that. That's why I'm here with you today. These are my expectations, not yours. That's why I didn't heal him. So I'm going to do one better. Lazarus, come out of the grave. And he does. He raises Lazarus from the dead in this inaugurated eschatological end-time resurrection appetizer. Isn't that beautiful? He did for Lazarus what awaits you and I. And word gets around. Let's speak Gen Z for a second. Bro! This dude, I know he's been speaking a lot of stuff and blowing our mind, and yeah, the mud on the eye, weird. He just raised the dude from the dead. And the chatter begins to shockwave across Israel. And it's perfect timing because it's Passover. Hundreds of thousands, if not more, are cramming into Jerusalem. And now is the time. And Jesus is sitting on this donkey, looking at this people who are longing for a king, knowing that they still don't get it. So as he's riding into town on this donkey, the impeccable fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy, like Zechariah 9:9, when it says, "Rejoice greatly, daughters of Zion. Shout, daughters of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And they begin to wave palm branches. They begin to lay their coats on the path before him. They are acting like a first century Greco-Roman Hellenized culture would act when they're returning from a victorious battle. And they are saying, Hosanna. And I want you to listen to the song that they're singing. The song that they're singing in Matthew 21:9 says this. The crowds went ahead of him, and those that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Save us now. Now is the time of salvation. He is here, the Messiah King, through the line of David. Remember what was told by Nathan to David? He will have a kingdom that will last forever. Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah is here, and it's about to go down. This is the king that they were expecting. And when Jesus rides into town, instead of marching up the stairs of Herod and taking the guy out, instead of confronting the political establishment, instead of calling all of his people to take out all the Roman guard, instead of going into Pilate's office and punching him in the face because he's not the governor, Jesus is the king. You know where he goes? He goes into the temple. And he starts to throw tables upside down and screaming at the Jews. And then he gets in the face of the Pharisees and the scribes and says, you don't get it. And this is when things start to turn. Who does this guy think he is? This is supposed to be Messiah. Why are you confronting us? We're God's chosen people. You want to confront someone, go to our proxy false king, Herod. Confront him. We knew it. We knew it. You are a power-hungry, miracle-fabricating charlatan. We will not be threatened by you any longer. We're taking you out. This is the pivot from Hosanna to crucify him. And the conspiracy to kill Jesus is mapped out. Within 5 days, Jesus will be betrayed, denied, abandoned, arrested, tried, publicly humiliated. And he's taken to this guy named Pilate, who's the governor. Pilate has no beef with Jesus. So it's like, all right, let's talk this out. You can see in John 18 how this conversation unfolds. Are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea, Jesus said? Or did others talk to you about me? Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting how that's similar to when Jesus asked, who do people say that I am? And Jesus says, you are the Messiah. And he says, who told you that? Well, with Pilate, nobody told him that. That's just what the rumors were. He didn't hear anything from God. Am I a Jew? Pilate replied, I'm not a Jew. I don't know your stuff. Your own people, the chief priest, handed you over to me. What is it that you've done? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. It's from another place. Oh, so you are a king then, Pilate says. And Jesus answered, you say that I'm a king? In fact, the reason I was born and came to the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth will listen to me. What is truth? Pilate says. And after finding no fault with Jesus, Pilate tried to free him numerous times, but the Jewish leaders weren't having it. And fearing political suicide for himself because he was not on the best terms with the Roman authority, Pilate relented to appease the mob, to squelch any sort of uprising. And this is what he does. On the day of preparation of Passover, at about the 6th hour, he took Jesus before the crowd and he says, "Oh, the irony. Behold your king." Ugh. How right he was and how wrong they were. This is what's really taking place on Palm Sunday. This is when God's story, BC, sends a shockwave through the cosmic universe into this place where every expectation of every individual who's even closest to Jesus became disoriented. Why? Because they were conflating and imposing their expectations on what type of king Jesus should be. And this leads us to a really important application as we head into this Holy Week. Here's the one thing that humanity has never gotten. Myself included, yourself included. Whether you're talking about Adam, Eve, Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, the prophets, the people that Pilate was talking to. Here's what they never get. They lose sight of the fact that God is always up to something. Can I declare that over you this morning? God is always up to something. See, what happens is we get cluttered and distracted by our own expectations on how life should go and how God should be in my life. And as we tend into an area of not being image bearers of God who has been created in his image, who then live in worship and harmony with him, we begin to create a God in our own image that operates how we believe he should operate. And suddenly we have this mismatch of expectations. You will be the God I expect you to be. You will be the king I expect you to be. And when you don't, you're probably not even a God. Definitely not a king. Not going to be the Lord of my life. We all get this. This is the conversation we have with people who are lost and dead in their sin. There can't be a God. I've been let down too much. I've been hurt too much. And the greatest lie that the enemy has told mankind from generation to generation is that God has abandoned you, that he's not who you thought he was. And we lose sight of the fact that he's up to something. As Jesus is riding in to your life on a colt as the king, how are you receiving him? Because even when it seems like we're in the throes of disappointed expectations, I want to declare to you this morning that Jesus is always up to something. The question is, how are you receiving him? Because here's the deal. Jesus is the king that we've been waiting for. It's the king that they were waiting for. And as he did establish the kingdom, and we're going to celebrate the beautiful inauguration of this eternal kingdom this week through his death and through his resurrection. I want you to remember how it echoes through his story BC into our lives right now. How amazing it is that he is of the line of David. He is the fulfillment of almost 500 Old Testament prophecies. He is the sinless Son of Man. He is the Lamb who takes away the sins of the world. He is the Redeemer of Israel, the hope of the nations, the defeater of death. Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He is the Ancient of Days whose kingdom will never end. And we are not bystanders who show up at church on Sunday mornings because we go to Salt and Light. We are redeemed souls, rescued by the King, invited into his kingdom, made citizens of his goodness. The problem enters when we compartmentalize that amazing reality and we say, yeah, but what about my marriage? What about my job? What about my finances? What about my anger, my depression, my anxiety, my shame, my parenting, my struggles with sin, my addictions, my regrets, my remorse? What about all that? I'm telling you that Jesus is riding on a colt into those areas of your life. Ready to be your king. Not the king you might have expected, but the king that will confront every dark area of your life to bring light and life and salvation and goodness. Can I tell you something right now? This has been my last 2 years. I have been more disoriented and dysregulated the past 2 years than any point in my entire life. And the wrestling match I'm in with God is whether I will bend my knee and receive him as my king. This is what he's inviting you into. This is the beauty of this week. This is the power and the magnificence of what we're going to be celebrating tomorrow night with a group of people in our community. Where we can be screaming Hosanna next to the Savior riding on a colt into their lives and into their hearts. What kind of king are we receiving today? I will tell you that he is a restorer of relationships. He's a provider of our needs. He's a healer and a sanctifier. He shatters addiction. He teaches us how to forgive. He teaches us how to be gracious. He walks with us when everybody else lets us down. He enables through the Holy Spirit the wisdom he has instilled in us so that we can walk righteously, even when we feel like we're surrounded by unrighteousness. He walks with us through our parenting struggles. He holds us in our depression. He weeps with us when we grieve. He grounds us in our anxieties. He reminds us that we're never alone, that he is always there. He orients us towards eternal hope. This, my friends, is who we are. This is who he is. This is what we celebrate this week. Behold your King. Would you stand with us as we close this morning?